The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council fell silent as Ambassador John Carter stepped onto the speaking platform. Hundreds of alien eyes watched him, some with curiosity, others with barely hidden contempt. The massive dome above displayed the swirling galaxies that made up Council space, 50,000 worlds united under one authority for over 3 millennia. Carter straightened his plain blue uniform, the lack of decoration standing in stark contrast to the ornate robes and ceremonial armor worn by the other species representatives. He looked directly at High Chancellor Vorks of the Zrixians, whose gray skin wrinkled with displeasure. "The people of Earth have considered your ultimatum," Carter said, his voice calm but firm. "We decline." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The Zrixian High Chancellor rose from his elevated seat, towering over the other council members. "Perhaps you misunderstand, human," Vorks said, each word precise and cold. "This is not a request. Either Earth submits to proper council oversight and regulation, or you face sanctions that will return your species to what you call your Stone Age." Carter nodded slowly. "We understand perfectly. For 70 years, humanity has participated in this council. For 70 years, we have watched as you disguise exploitation as cooperation. We've seen how worlds that don't comply mysteriously suffer resource shortages or pirate attacks." A Palaxian representative stood up, her feathered crest flattening in anger. "How dare you make such accusations? The Council brings peace and prosperity." "To some," Carter replied. "Mostly to the founding species. The rest of us provide resources, labor, and military support while receiving technology that's always one generation behind what the founders enjoy." "Outrageous," shouted a Macteri delegate, pounding a clawed appendage on his desk. Carter raised his hand, and the shouting gradually subsided. "Earth isn't asking for concessions or special treatment. We're not here to renegotiate. I've come to inform you that as of today, Earth withdraws from all Galactic Council affairs." The chamber erupted in chaos. Some delegates leaped to their feet, others huddled with their advisors. A few simply sat in stunned silence. "Silence!" Vorks roared, and the room gradually quieted. "Ambassador Carter, such a withdrawal violates 17 different treaties. Your colonies would be forfeit. Your ships would be banned from Council space." Carter nodded. "We're aware of the consequences. All human ships are already returning to our territory. Our colonies have been evacuating for weeks. Our embassies are closing as I speak." In orbit above the Council homeworld, Fleet Admiral Susan Wright watched the transmission from the bridge of the UES Constellation. Around her, the last remaining human diplomatic fleet prepared to depart. "Admiral, we're receiving demands to power down and prepare for boarding from Council security," reported her communications officer. Wright's face remained expressionless. "Activate shields. Plot course for the jump point. Inform all ships. We leave in 5 minutes." Back in the Council chamber, Vorks descended from his platform, approaching Carter with barely controlled rage. "You cannot simply walk away, human. The consequences will be severe." "For whom?" Carter asked quietly. "Your worlds haven't manufactured their own medicine in 50 years. Your ships use navigation systems designed and maintained by us. Your translators, your food production, your energy distribution, all rely on human innovation and human labor." A Valtherian representative approached, her crystalline form glittering in the chamber's light. "John," she said softly, using his first name against protocol, "reconsider. The Council will collapse without human involvement." Carter smiled sadly. "That's not our problem anymore, Ilara. You all decided we weren't worthy of equal partnership. Now you can learn what that means." As Carter turned to leave, Vorks called after him. "You'll come crawling back within a year. Humans need the stars." Carter paused at the doorway. "No, Chancellor. The stars, it seems, need humans, and perhaps they deserve better caretakers than this council." The doors closed behind him with a soft hiss, leaving the chamber in stunned silence. The age of human cooperation with the Galactic Council had ended. None of the delegates realized they had just witnessed the beginning of the council's end. 6 months had passed since the humans left. Captain Alan Foster stood at the viewport of his ship, the Stardust, watching as his crew unloaded medical supplies onto the Palaxian colony docks. He wasn't supposed to be here. No human ships were, but he couldn't ignore the desperate call from an old friend. "Captain, we need to hurry," said his first mate, Liz Daniels. "Council patrol might come by any minute." Elen nodded. "How bad is it down there?" "Bad," Liz replied. "Their medical fabricators stopped working 3 months ago. Without replacement parts from Earth, they can't make basic antibiotics." Outside, the once bustling spaceport was nearly empty. Most trading ships had stopped coming after the Council's supply chains began breaking down. The mighty Galactic Council, which had ruled for thousands of years, was starting to show cracks. On the Council capital world, High Chancellor Vorks stared at reports from across Council space. Supply shortages, malfunctioning technology, and growing unrest filled every screen. "This is unacceptable," Vorks snapped at his advisors. "It's been half a year. Why can't our engineers replicate human maintenance techniques?" An advisor with blue scales bowed low. "Chancellor, the humans didn't just provide labor. Their unique problem-solving approach, we struggle to duplicate it." "Nonsense." Vorks slammed his fist on the table. "Primitive humans are easily replaced. Increase the work shifts. Bring in more Zethric engineers." "We tried, sir. 3 more systems failed yesterday. The Brantarian food processing stations are operating at 20% capacity." Another advisor spoke up. "Several outer worlds are reporting food shortages. The transport network is breaking down. Without human navigators, long-range shipments are delayed or lost." Vorks dismissed them with a wave. "Find solutions. The Council ruled before humans joined us, and will rule long after they're forgotten." At the abandoned human embassy on Centaurid Prime, Lieutenant Kate Miller packed the last crates. As the final human representative on this world, her job was to close everything down. Outside the embassy walls, a crowd had gathered. Unlike the angry mobs of a few months ago, these people were quiet, worried. Many held signs asking the humans to return. A young Centaurian climbed over the wall and approached Kate. His blue skin was paler than normal, showing signs of the nutrient deficiency spreading through his people. "Please," he said in broken English, "when humans come back, we need help." Kate's expression softened. "I don't know. That's not my decision to make. Tell your leaders. Council lied to us, said we don't need humans." The boy pointed to the crowd. "But we do." Kate nodded sadly. "I'll pass along your message, but I have to leave today." As she loaded the final crate onto her shuttle, an explosion rocked a nearby district. The city's power grid was failing again. Without human technicians, the Centaurians couldn't maintain the fusion technology they'd relied on for generations. On Earth, in the new headquarters of the United Earth Government, Admiral Susan Wright delivered her report to the Security Council. 3 minor species have officially left the Galactic Council this week. The Palaxians, the Ventari, and the Hoxtal all cited economic collapse as their reason. President Sam Martinez looked troubled. And the Council's response? Sanctions against the leaving members, but they lacked the resources to enforce them. Susan pulled up a star map showing spreading red zones. These areas have reported major infrastructure failures. And these, she highlighted several yellow points, are where armed conflicts have broken out over resources. "Should we intervene?" asked Defense Secretary Paul Johnson. "No," Martinez said firmly. "We made our choice. For too long, the Council exploited us while pretending we were equal partners. Let them learn what equality truly means." Susan nodded, but couldn't help feeling concerned as she studied the map. The collapse was happening faster than anyone had predicted. The ripple effect of humanity's departure was turning into a tidal wave, and nobody, not even Earth's leaders, knew where it would end. 1 year had passed since humanity walked away. Dr. Peter Wallace adjusted his telescope on Earth's orbital university. Through it, he could see the distant flashes of weapons fire near the former Council border. 3 more species had declared independence this week alone. The Great Galactic Council, once ruling over 50,000 worlds, now controlled barely half that number. Peter made notes in his journal. As a xenoanthropologist, he had spent decades studying alien cultures. Now he documented their collapse. "Recording another border dispute, Doctor?" asked his assistant. Peter nodded. "The Vrillians and Jopari are fighting over a mining moon. Last year, they were allies." "It's happening everywhere," the assistant said. "Did you see the news? The Galactic Bank has officially failed." On the view screen, the Galactic News Network showed riots on the Council capital. Without the human financial systems that had kept the economy stable, inflation had spiraled out of control. Many worlds had returned to bartering goods rather than using Council currency. In Earth's high orbit, Vice Admiral Diane Clark received an urgent message on her flagship. A Council diplomatic vessel was requesting emergency assistance. "They claim their ship is damaged and drifting into disputed territory," reported her communications officer. "They're begging for human intervention before they're shot down." Diane sighed. "Send our standard response. We no longer involve ourselves in Council affairs." "Ma'am, they say they have children aboard." Diane's expression remained neutral, but her eyes showed her inner conflict. "Send them emergency repair instructions and coordinates for a neutral zone they can reach. But we will not intervene directly. Those are our orders." The officer nodded sadly and transmitted the message. Below on Earth, cities bustled with activity. Without the drain of Council demands, the human economy was booming. Resources that once flowed outward to Council worlds now strengthened Earth and its colonies. New buildings rose in every city. Farms expanded. Factories worked at full capacity. Frank Mitchell, CEO of Mitchell Interstellar Trading, reviewed the quarterly profits with satisfaction. When humans withdrew from Council space, many had feared economic disaster. Instead, the opposite had occurred. His assistant interrupted his thoughts. "Sir, there's a Zrixian trade delegation requesting a meeting." "Again?" Frank shook his head. "Tell them the same thing we told them last week. Earth businesses no longer accept Council currency, and we're not interested in their technology exchanges. They have nothing we need. They're offering exclusive mining rights on 12 worlds. Last month, it was 10 worlds. They're getting desperate." Frank turned back to his reports. "The answer is still no." On the Council capital, the Great Council chamber was in disarray. Where once 1,000 delegates had gathered in orderly sessions, now fewer than 400 remained, divided into shouting factions. High Chancellor Vorks struggled to maintain order. "Representatives, please, we must unite, or we will all fall." A Tellarite delegate stood up. "Your leadership has failed us, Vorks. When humans offered friendship, you demanded submission. Now look at us." "The humans will return," Vorks insisted. "They need our markets." "No," said a Palaxian representative. "We've received reports. Human colonies are thriving. Their economy grows while ours crumbles. They don't need us at all." The debate erupted into shouting again. In a secure conference room on Earth, President Martinez met with Ambassador Carter and other leaders. A holographic map showed the fragmentation of Council space. Red zones of conflict were spreading. "It's happening faster than we predicted," Martinez said. 3 competing factions have formed within the Council. They'll be at war within months." Carter nodded. "And when they go to war, millions will suffer." "Should we reconsider our position?" asked the general. "Perhaps limited re-engagement." Martinez looked around the table. "We made our choice for good reasons. The Council exploited us for decades, but now innocent people are caught in the collapse." He paused. "I want options on my desk tomorrow. Humanitarian options. The Galactic Council has proven they can't live without us. Now we need to decide what that means for our future." 2 years had passed since humanity's departure. In the once Grand Council chamber, Only empty seats remained. The final meeting had ended in shouting and threats. Now, three separate factions claimed to be the true Galactic Council. The mighty alliance that had stood for thousands of years had officially broken apart. Frank Mitchell sat in his office overlooking New York City, facing three alien representatives. Their once fine robes were worn, and their proud postures had given way to desperate pleading. "Mr. Mitchell," said the Zrixian diplomat, "we are prepared to offer unprecedented terms, exclusive trading rights, advanced technology with no restrictions, even seats on our ruling council." Frank leaned back in his chair. Which council would that be? Last I heard, there were three of them, all fighting for control. The aliens exchanged uncomfortable glances. "Our faction controls the most important worlds," said the second representative. "We can guarantee safe passage for your ships through territories you're actively fighting over." Frank shook his head. 2 years ago, you claimed humans were barely worthy of galactic citizenship. Now you're offering us positions of power. Why would we trust you? "Because without Earth, the galaxy is tearing itself apart," admitted the third alien, her voice quiet. "Millions are suffering. Please, we need your help." Frank stood up. "I believe our meeting is over. Earth's position hasn't changed." As the representatives left, Frank looked out his window at the thriving city below. Business was better than ever. But each night, he saw the desperate messages from worlds he had once visited, now struggling to survive. At Earth's moon base, Captain Lisa Peterson reviewed the patrol reports. More refugee ships approach Earth's borders every day. "Another transport requesting asylum, Captain," reported her lieutenant. "They say their world is experiencing famine after the distribution systems collapsed." Lisa studied the scanner readings. "How many aboard?" "About 300, mostly families." Lisa thought of the refugee camps already established on Mars. They were filling quickly. "Follow standard procedure. Security screening. Then direct them to Processing Station 4. "Yes, Captain. That's the 5th ship today." Lisa nodded grimly. "And it won't be the last." In the White House Situation Room, President Martinez met with his advisors. The star map on the wall showed the three competing council factions in different colors. Red zones marked active conflicts. "The fighting has spread to the Orion sector," reported Defense Secretary Johnson. "The Zrixian faction is losing ground quickly." "Refugee numbers?" Martins asked. "Over 20,000 arrived this week alone," answered a woman at the end of the table. "Our processing centers are at capacity. These people have lost everything." Martinez studied the faces around the table. 2 years ago, we made a choice to walk away. We were tired of being treated as second-class citizens in a galaxy we helped stabilize. The Council took our innovations, our labor, our resources, and gave little in return. He pointed to the map. Now they're destroying themselves, and innocent people are caught in the middle. Ambassador Carter, recently returned from retirement, spoke up. "The question we face isn't whether the Council deserved to fall. The question is what kind of galactic neighbors we want to be now that it has." Secretary Johnson frowned. "If we re-engage, what's to stop a new council from exploiting us again?" "We set the terms this time," said Carter. "The balance of power has shifted. They need us far more than we need them." Martinez nodded slowly. "I want proposals for limited re-engagement. Humanitarian aid first, then diplomatic contact with all three factions. We won't take sides in their war, but we can help the civilians caught in it." As the meeting ended, Martinez lingered, looking at the map of conflicts spreading across what was once a unified galactic community. "We showed them they couldn't survive without us," he said quietly to Carter. "Now we need to decide what to do with that power." Carter nodded. "The Council crumbled when humans walked away. Perhaps that needed to happen before something better could take its place." 3 years after humanity's withdrawal, Earth's diplomatic center in Geneva buzzed with unusual activity. For the first time since the departure, official representatives from non-Earth worlds gathered on human soil. 17 species had sent delegates, former enemies now united by desperation. Ambassador Nicole Bennett straightened her formal jacket as she prepared to greet them. When Earth closed its borders, she had been a junior diplomat. Now she would speak for all humanity. "They're ready for you, Ambassador," her assistant said. Nicole nodded and entered the grand meeting hall. The aliens rose as she walked in. Some she recognized from the old council days. Others were from worlds that had rarely been allowed to speak in council meetings. "Welcome to Earth," Nicole said, taking her seat at the circular table. 3 years ago, we left Galactic Affairs because we were not treated as equals. Why have you come here today?" A tall, gray-skinned Alturian stepped forward. "Ambassador Bennett, I am spokesperson Kren, chosen to address you on behalf of our coalition. We come to formally request Earth's return to Galactic Affairs." Nicole kept her expression neutral. "The Council treated humans as inferiors for decades. Why would we return?" "Because there is no more Council," Kren replied simply. "What exists now are 3 warring factions, millions of refugees, and dozens of independent worlds trying to survive." Another delegate spoke up, a small green-skinned Merlani. "My world never had a real voice in the Council. The Zrixians and their allies controlled everything. Now their empire is falling, but too many innocent people are suffering in the collapse." Nicole looked around the room. "What exactly are you proposing?" "A new beginning," said Kren. "Not a council where some rule over others, but a true cooperative of equal worlds." "Fine words," Nicole replied. "But we've heard promises before." An older Zrixian rose slowly. His once ornate robes were simple now. "Ambassador, I served the old council for 200 years. I was taught that humans were clever but primitive, useful but inferior. We were wrong." His voice trembled. "Catastrophically wrong." He paused, composing himself. "The Zrixians hid the truth from most council worlds. Your people have a unique ability we lack. You can understand and mediate between radically different species and viewpoints. Without humans, the cultural and biological gulfs between our peoples become unbridgeable." Nicole leaned forward. "Explain." A reptilian delegate nodded. "My people communicate primarily through scent and color patterns. The Jolari use sonic vibrations. The Venturi communicate through electromagnetic fields. Before humans joined the galactic community, translation between such different communication methods was nearly impossible. Humans," the Zrixian added, "have an extraordinary adaptability. You created the universal translation systems. You designed interfaces all species could use. You found compromises between completely different biological needs and cultural imperatives." Nicole looked surprised. "The Council told us those were cooperative achievements." "Another lie," Kren said. "Over 70% of galactic infrastructure relied on human innovations. Without you as the bridge between our different species, cooperation has become nearly impossible." Later that day, President Richard Summers addressed the United Nations, his face grave on view screens around the world. "For 3 years, we have watched from a distance as the galactic community we left behind fell into chaos. Today, representatives from 17 worlds came to us not as the mighty council of old, but as equals seeking partnership." He paused, looking out at the assembly. "They have admitted what the council never would, that humanity was not just another member species, but a vital connector that helped bridge vast biological and cultural differences between galactic civilizations." Murmurs spread through the chamber. "We walked away because we were treated as less than equals. Now we must decide. Do we extend a helping hand to rebuild something better, or do we remain isolated while billions suffer in a collapse we helped trigger?" In the Geneva Diplomatic Center, Nicole studied the proposal the delegates had brought. It offered Earth unprecedented authority in a new galactic structure. The irony wasn't lost on her. Humanity had gained more by walking away than they ever could have by staying. The question now was what to do with that power. 1 month after the delegation's visit to Earth, representatives from 34 worlds gathered on Luna, Earth's moon. The meeting place was symbolic, neutral territory, yet clearly under human protection. Earth had agreed to limited re-engagement, but only under new terms. Colonel Jake Morris surveyed the security arrangements with a critical eye. As head of security for the historic gathering, he left nothing to chance. Earth military ships patrolled the space around Luna, while mixed teams of human and alien security personnel guarded the conference facility. All delegations have arrived safely, Colonel reported his lieutenant. The Zrixian ship requested special docking privileges, but was denied as per your orders. Jake nodded. Everyone follows the same protocols now. No exceptions for former council enforcers. Inside the conference dome, the scene would have been unimaginable 3 years earlier. Species that once dominated the council now competed for human favor. The Zrixians, once the haughty leaders of galactic society, found themselves seated alongside species they had previously considered beneath notice. Chief Negotiator Olivia Grant stepped to the center of the circular chamber. Unlike the tiered seating of the old council, where status determined elevation, this room was perfectly level. "Welcome to Luna," Olivia began. "Earth has considered your request for re-engagement. We are prepared to help rebuild galactic society, but only under non-negotiable terms." She activated a holographic display showing a new organizational structure. First, equal representation for all member worlds. No special voting powers based on history or size. Several delegates nodded approval, while the Zrixian representatives shifted uncomfortably. Second, complete technology sharing. No more restricted access to advancements. This caused more murmuring. For centuries, advanced species had withheld their best technology from less developed worlds. Third, military autonomy. Earth will participate in joint peacekeeping, but our fleet remains independent. A reptilian delegate raised a scaled hand. What guarantees do we have that humans won't use this independence to dominate others as the Council once did? Olivia smiled. A fair question. Our terms include mutual oversight. All members will have observers embedded in each other's governments. The discussions continued for hours, sometimes heated but mostly productive. Outside the conference room, Jake received an urgent message from his security team. "Colonel, we've detected unauthorized communications from the Zrixian delegation. They appear to be coordinating with a cloaked vessel beyond our security perimeter." Jake frowned. Old habits die hard. Put all teams on alert. Inside, as Olivia outlined the framework for a new galactic cooperative, the doors burst open. A junior Zrixian diplomat rushed in, ignoring his superior's angry gestures. "Stop this immediately." The young Zrixian's voice echoed through the chamber. "I have evidence that our delegation plans to sabotage these negotiations." The room erupted in chaos. "Security," Jake called, rushing in with his team. The senior Zrixian diplomat rose, fury on his gray face. "This is treason. Remove this fool." The junior diplomat held up a data device. "The old council leadership has ordered our delegation to agree to human terms, while secretly planning to undermine the new alliance from within. They believe they can regain control once galactic stability returns." Jake took the device, scanning it for weapons or viruses, before handing it to Earth's technical team. After a tense few minutes, they confirmed its contents. "The information appears genuine," a technician reported. "Detailed plans to gradually reassert Zrixian control over the new organization." The senior Zrixian diplomats were escorted out. Surprisingly, several younger Zrixians remained, including the whistleblower. "We wish to continue representing our people," said the young diplomat. "Many Zrixians desire real change. The old power structure does not speak for all of us." Olivia looked to Earth's delegation for guidance. After a brief conference, she nodded. "The negotiations will continue. This attempted sabotage only proves how necessary a new system is." As the discussions resumed, Jake Morris stood guard, reflecting on how much had changed. 3 years ago, the mighty council seemed untouchable. Now its former leaders plotted desperately to maintain relevance, while younger members of their own species rejected their authority. The galaxy was transforming, and humanity was no longer at the margins. They now sat at the center, helping birth a new order. 5 years had passed since humanity withdrew from galactic affairs. On the planet once known as the Council Capital, a crowd gathered to witness history. The Grand Council headquarters, which had stood for over 2,000 years, was being demolished. Admiral Greg Sanders watched from a viewing platform alongside representatives from 100 worlds. His uniform bore the new insignia of the Galactic Cooperative, a spiral galaxy with a small blue Earth prominently featured. "Quite a sight," said a Tellarite diplomat beside him. "I never thought I'd live to see this day." Greg nodded. Out with the old, in with the new. Where the council building once stood would rise the new cooperative assembly, a circular structure with no raised platforms or special chambers for privileged species. Every member would sit at equal height in a true circle, symbolizing their equal standing. "Your peacekeeping fleet departs tomorrow?" asked the Tellarite. "Yes," Greg replied. "First joint mission. Ships from 22 worlds working together." The Tellarite looked impressed. In the old days, only Council founder species commanded such missions. "Those days are over," Greg said simply. Across the galaxy, worlds that had suffered during the Council's collapse were beginning to recover. Human engineers worked alongside alien technicians, rebuilding infrastructure. Trade routes reopened. Refugee camps emptied as people returned to their homes. On Earth, Ambassador John Carter packed his belongings. After retiring when humanity withdrew, he had been called back for one final mission. "Are you sure about this, John?" asked his wife. "You're not exactly young anymore." John smiled. Someone who was there at the end should be there for the new beginning. A transport waited to take him to the new assembly, where he would take Earth's seat in the cooperative. As he prepared to leave, he received a message from President Martinez. "Remember, John, we're not there to lead or dominate, just to help build something better than what came before." On the former council capital, the last of the old building came down. As the dust settled, construction teams moved in immediately. The new structure would rise quickly, using techniques developed on Earth, but enhanced by technologies from a dozen worlds. In orbit above, the new joint peacekeeping fleet prepared for its first mission. Unlike the old council enforcers who imposed order, these ships would protect trade routes and deliver aid to worlds still recovering. Captain Laura Reed commanded the UES Concord, Earth's contribution to the fleet. On her bridge stood officers from 7 different species, an integration unthinkable under the old regime. "Captain, all ships report ready," said her first officer, a young Palaxian. "Signal the fleet," Laura ordered. "We depart on schedule." She watched as ships of various designs formed up around her vessel. Not matching, not uniform, but working together, much like the species that built them. On dozens of worlds across the galaxy, memorial ceremonies marked the 5th anniversary of what historians now call the withdrawal. Stone monuments were unveiled bearing the same inscription in multiple languages. "Sometimes you must walk away to find a better path forward." As the first session of the new assembly opened, John Carter took his seat among the delegates. He had last stood in the old council chamber to announce humanity's departure. Now he returned to help shape a different future. The assembly speaker, elected by all members, called for order. "Today marks not just the creation of a new organization, but a new philosophy of galactic cooperation. No species rules over others. No world's needs outweigh another's. We stand equal, we work together, or we accomplish nothing." John looked around at faces hopeful and uncertain. The path ahead would not be easy. Old hatreds and prejudices wouldn't disappear overnight. Some would resist the new equality. But for the first time, there was genuine opportunity for a fair system. "The Galactic Council crumbled when humans walked away," the speaker continued. "Let the history books record that something better rose from its ruins." As the session began, John reflected on the journey that had brought them here. Humanity had been underestimated, marginalized, and exploited. But in walking away, they had demonstrated their true importance. Not as rulers, but as bridge builders. Not as conquerors, but as connectors. Sometimes the greatest power came not from domination, but from the courage to walk away, and the wisdom to return on better terms.